So this past weekend, I traveled with my family to Wichita, Kansas, and I played in my first ever over-the-board chess tournament. It was the 2026 Kansas Open, and I was playing in the amateur section. And in my very first round, very first rated chess game of all time for me, I was paired against none other than Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock. Now, granted, this was the original Dwayne Johnson, who was born before Dwayne Johnson from Moana. So yeah, different spelling, and this gentleman was he was an older guy from Colby, Kansas. We were talking a little bit before the game, and so my wife and I used to live in Western Kansas, so that was kind of cool. So yeah, sorry for the clickbait title there, but it's kind of a running joke in the online chess community with some of those ridiculous titles and thumbnails. So from now on, we won't do that. But yes, so he was rated 1081 before the tournament, and I of course did not have a rating because this is my first ever over the board USCF game. But yeah, he was a really nice guy. I'm glad it was a perfect opponent to have in your first game. He was really polite, really just positive vibes. And before the game, we shook hands, said good luck, and he said good luck, but not too much luck, which is a very grandpa thing to say. And I was sitting near his table throughout the tournament, and he said that to all of his opponents. So it was just like it was a nice, wholesome way to get things started. And so he had the white pieces, and I was playing as black, and he opened with e4, which is the most common starting move in chess. And when I have the white pieces, that is what I like to play. And so going into the tournament, I had a few different responses prepared for e4, but specifically before this game, I had kind of deliberately in my mind made the conscious decision, the commitment to, if they played e4, I had kind of predetermined that I was going to respond with c5, which is the Sicilian defense. And so then he plays d4, which this is now the Smith-Morra Gambit. And so he's, putting his pawn where it can be captured. I'm not really sure why it's called a gambit, though, because then the queen can just immediately recapture it. So, right, like if I take and then he takes, he's not really losing a pawn. So that is what happens. I capture his d-pawn, and then he immediately recaptures with his queen. And then I play the natural development move here, knight to c6, which is attacking the queen and developing my knight. So I'm getting a tempo. He's going to have to move that somewhere else. And he just takes it right back to the starting square. So at this point, if you have the eval bar on, if you have the engine, it actually says this is an equal position. And so as black, that's a good thing, right? You've equalized. This would be a favorable position for black. But of course, during the game, you don't have the engine. You don't know that you're equal. But so far, right, this is an opening that I'd seen online. I've played this before. We're in pretty familiar territory still at this point. Nothing too crazy has happened. So then I play g6 with the intent to fianchetto my bishop on this dark square diagonal, and then eventually bring my knight out and castle. That's typically how I play it. He then plays bishop b5, and I'm not really sure what this move does because, if my pawn had moved, he'd be pinning my knight to the king. Or, if we were over here and the dark square bishop came out, he'd be pinning it to the queen, right? But here, if he takes my knight, I can just recapture with a pawn. So I'm not really in any danger. I could move my knight somewhere else, but if he trades the bishop for the knight, I'm happy with that. That's not a threat that I'm concerned about. So I just continue with my plan to put the bishop here, and then he does indeed, he takes, which I don't think that was the right move. The engine doesn't like it, but even during the game, I was kind of like, I don't see what that accomplishes. And so I just recapture with my pawn towards the center. And at this point, 6 moves in, I'm feeling pretty okay. Nothing too crazy has happened just yet. So then he plays knight f3, and my guess is that he's probably, at the time I was thinking he's probably getting ready to castle. And And so I do the same. I bring my knight out. I am attacking his pawn, so if he does decide to autopilot castle, I'd win a pawn, which is something that sometimes happens in online games, but we're not playing an online game, we're playing over the board, where each player has 100 minutes on their clock. So he's probably not going to make that mistake, but it does, force him to do something else before he castles, and then also, frees me up to do the same. So he responds with knight c3, defending the pawn. And then I play e6. And to be completely honest with you, I do not remember why I played e6 or what I was thinking when I played e6. For whatever reason, I wanted to delay castling. I didn't want to. I don't know why I didn't just do that right off the bat. So I don't actually have a lot of commentary on why I made this move. But then he decides to castle, and I decide, okay, I'm also going to castle, because since I'm playing my first over-the-board game, I want to be principled, I want to be solid, I don't want to do anything too wild. I want to, just have a nice, safe game. And so at this position, after 9 moves, this feels pretty decent, right? Like, I haven't made any giant blunders, and it feels equal. We're equal on material, and things seem fine. So at this point, he plays h3, which, I get that you're creating an escape square for your king, you're creating some luft, so that kind of makes sense. But I don't know, there was no immediate threat, and so it feels like he probably should have done something else to develop his pieces. This is kind of like a passive move, and kind of gives me an opportunity to be the one to take the initiative and sort of dictate what happens next. And so at this point, I play d5. And the reason that I was thinking this in my mind was, well, it's defended by this pawn, by this pawn, by this knight, and by this queen. So there's 4 defenders, and at most he has 1, 2, 3 attackers. So in my mind, I was like, this is a good situation. I can go ahead and push this, and it's going to be safe. And when you're playing online in shorter time controls, you don't necessarily have time to calculate or do all these counting exercises. But when you're playing over the board, I could spend 5 minutes being like, okay, well, if I do this, what are all the possible permutations? And it was nice to be able to have that time to actually calculate before making a move. So I'm like, okay, this is in a pretty good spot. And then he decides to, he can either capture, or he can do something else, he can ignore, he can move his pawn. He decides to push his pawn forward and target my knight. And so here, I have a few different places I can move. These are all of the legal moves. Here, 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 here. So here, we'll get to in a moment. Here, obviously, just hangs a knight to the pawn. Don't want to do that. Here, seems kind of bad. It's not doing much over there. Retreating here doesn't do much either. The engine afterwards actually said I should go here, and then I have 2 people attacking this pawn. Obviously, at the time, I didn't see that, and moving backwards felt kind of weird. So in my mind, I was actually thinking, if I move it forward, this knight is planted pretty far in his territory, and if he captures, I'll take here, and then our queens are looking at each other, I'll be attacking his knight. So in my mind, I thought moving the knight forward was the way to go, which is what I did. And then here, in my mind, I was kind of assuming he would recapture or take with his knight. But he did something here that actually kind of became a theme throughout the game, where he refused or declined any sort of exchange of material. And so he said, I don't want to trade my knight, so I'm just going to move it. And he moves it to the side of the board, knight a4. And in my mind already, I'm thinking okay, this is probably not a good move, because it's over here on the side doing nothing, and it really doesn't have anywhere to go either. So at this point, I kind of shifted out of opening fundamentals mode, and I shifted into, I guess, more of middle game strategy mode. And I was like, all right, my plan is now going to be to figure out a way to basically win this knight. And yeah, there's a saying, knights on the rim are dim. There's a 5th or 6th grader that shows up to chess club, and he's got all the sayings like that. And so I was thinking of him when the knight came out here. I was like, oh yeah, Griffin would have a lot to say about that move. So I'm thinking, okay, how do I attack this knight? Well, it's on a light square diagonal, so maybe I get my bishop, my light squared bishop involved. Obviously, the engine doesn't like this move, but at the time, in my mind, it seemed pretty logical because then I can just push this pawn and attack him. So then he plays bishop e3. I don't know what that does or what he was thinking. I don't understand the logic behind that one, other than I guess just opening up his back rank. And so then I play queen a5 because now I am attacking his knight, and it really doesn't have anywhere to go. If it goes here, my knight captures it. It can't go back here. If it goes here, the pawn takes it. If it jumps here, if it tries to escape this way, my knight takes it. His bishop recaptures, and then my queen recaptures. So kind of at this point, I was like, the knight has nowhere to go. It is, it's done. It's gonna be off the board here pretty soon. So I play c3, or sorry, he plays c3, which does defend his knight with the queen. So if I take his knight, he'll get my queen. Obviously, I don't want to do that. But then I go ahead and reveal the attack c5. And so I'm thinking at this point the knight is imminently in danger. And then his next move here, he actually blunders. And so I think at this point he could kind of see like the knight is about to die. And he was kind of like grunting, like like he wasn't happy with his decision to put the knight here. The body language kind of shifted, and that's one of the things that's interesting about Over the Board is like, you could tell he was like disappointed, or not disappointed, but sort of upset or not happy with his move, and he was kind of like his body language was shifting. And then in my mind, I'm like trying not to be like grinning, because online I'd be like, kind of bobbing my head or smiling, but in person I didn't want to be like a jerk, and so I'm trying to like, I can tell I'm gonna win some material, and so I'm trying to just to keep a poker face as not to be like, overly excited or not visibly overly excited. But what he does next is b4, and so he attacks my queen, and I don't know. I'm not sure his thought process here. I mean, yes, he's attacking my queen, creating a little bit of chaos, but I can just take the knight because, and that's what I do, right? I take with the queen. And so, yes, his queen can get me, but my bishop is defending. And so at this point, I've won his knight full up, like I'm up 3 points of material, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. In the game, because I know that now I have a pretty decent advantage. And so again, he does this thing where he doesn't want to trade the pieces, or he doesn't want to initiate the trade. And so his next move I don't understand either. He plays queen b3. So instead of recapturing, he just moves his queen here. And so it's like, I guess he wants me to take, and then he'll open up his rook. Like, I'm not sure what the purpose of this move was. And so I don't want to do that. I don't want to open up his rook. So I just play c4. I just move my pawn forward. So I'm attacking his queen, and he's going to have to do something else with it. So here he does finally decide to trade. The queens come off the board, and I'm just up 3 points of material, which is great. And we've kind of gone over all of this pretty fast. All of that transpired over the course of like 60 to 90 minutes. Like we had been sitting at the board for at least an hour by the time we got to move 17, which is just so different than playing online. But right, we had been calculating, we had been looking at all these different things. A lot of time had come off the clock by the time we got to this position. And then he plays bishop d4, planting his bishop in the middle here, defending both of these pawns, and is defended by the knight. And then I play a5, and my thought process is I can, if he takes, I recapture with the rook, and if not, I'll take this pawn. He plays rook a b1, defending the pawn, and then I play f6. And I wasn't sure, I was trying to do all the calculations to figure out if I take and then he takes, or with the rook, and I was trying to think about how I can get this bishop or knight out of here, and I really wanted to take this, but I was concerned about the order that he would recapture in. So I didn't know if he'd take with the bishop, and then I trade the bishop, and then he takes the knight, and then his knight is planted in a pretty good spot, and so I wasn't exactly sure like which sequence he would go with. But he doesn't even take, right? He doesn't initiate the exchange again. He just moves his other rook, which I don't get. I don't get why he didn't take. So then I go ahead and take this pawn, and maybe he's planning to double up rooks. I don't know. He takes back. It's an even exchange. Whoops. And then I move my rook over to the center. He pushes his pawn forward. I bring my bishop back. And here my thought process was that I'd have a nice little tactic depending on how he responds, because my bishop is pointed at this rook. And if I push my pawn forward, it would be attacking this rook. So if he does like a waiting move or something, and I move my pawn up, I will be winning a rook somehow, either by bishop for rook or by capturing here. But Dwayne is no spring chicken, right? Like he's been around, he's played a lot of chess games in his life. He's not going to fall for that. I don't know what it is that they say, right? He has a crown of wisdom with the gray hair. He's not going to fall for that kind of stuff. There's a saying about older chess players that even though they've forgotten half the chess that they've ever played, the half that they do remember is still more chess than what you've known your entire life. And so, Dwayne, he saw this coming. He makes a preemptive move, rook c2, so that if I move forward, it's not attacking it. He can move the other rook. And so he avoids that little trap that I was trying to set. So then finally I do take his pawn, and then he doesn't take back yet again. He decides to move his bishop in here. Obviously I'm going to have to move my rook and deal with that. So I recapture with my knight, take his bishop with my knight because I didn't really want it in there, and then he does take with his pawn, and this pawn actually sort of becomes a problem later because, as you'll notice, it is a passed pawn. But in my mind, I was like, I don't really need to deal with this because at any point, I can bring a rook or I can bring a bishop, and I can sort of get rid of this pawn whenever I want. And so in my mind, I didn't deal with it, and that sort of became a headache later. So here I play h6 because I did not want the knight to be able to jump forward, so kind of restricting where his knight can go. And then he plays rook fc1, doubling up his rooks. But I don't know why they're doubled up on this file because there's a pawn here. So to me, this doesn't seem too crazy. Then I play e4, attacking his knight. He goes backwards with the knight. And then I play bishop a4, targeting his rook. And so he moves it over to the side. And then I play bishop d4. And my thought process here is I'm pinning this pawn, so this pawn can't move because it's pinned to the king. I'm also able to pick up this pawn whenever I want. He really doesn't have any way to defend that. So then, I don't know. So yeah, we're up 4 points of material at this point, and we still have each maybe like an hour-ish left on our clocks, or we've both used maybe like half our time. And so then he does knight takes c4. And here I don't know what I was thinking. In my head, I was like, okay, I can take the knight, but then his rook is going to come in and fork my bishops. I should have just taken the knight. In my head, I was like, okay, I want to be able to get this pawn and get this pawn. And so I was like, well, why don't I just give a check to the king and then come get this pawn? And what I totally failed to see, I totally forgot that this rook was here. So in my mind, I was like, I'll give a check. He has to move his king, and then I can come get this other pawn. And so I play bishop takes f2 check, and then he takes rook f2, and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot that rook was there. So at this point, I have to pause a little bit. Well, and I don't have much choice on my next move. I mean, I have to take the rook, basically. So I take the rook. He takes with his king. And then I take the knight, and he takes back. So at this point, I was up 4 points of material. and I could have been up much more, but I sort of bungled that little exchange because I forgot about the rook. And my position, because if we go back here, I'm feeling great about my position. I'm like, I should be able to convert the win. Here, I'm like, okay, I'm still winning because I have an extra bishop, but like my pawn structure is garbage, and he has this passed pawn that is now supported by a rook, and so I'm feeling much worse about my position than I was before all of that transpired. And so yeah, I kind of lost focus a little bit there. So I play rook b2 check to give myself some time. And then I play bishop c6 because he was going to take my pawn. So the rook was attacking my bishop, and the king was maybe going to take my pawn. So by moving here, not only does my bishop get to safety, it also anchors my pawn here so that his king can't take it, and it is blockading this passed pawn from moving forward. So this move actually was pretty clutch, and maybe things have stabilized a little bit. Maybe, emphasis on maybe. He plays rook b4, I guess trying to trade rooks. The engine, when I was analyzing later, did want me to trade rooks, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, there's a free pawn, so I do rook takes g2. I want to remove as many of his pawns as possible to prevent any sort of nonsense later. He plays rook b6, attacking my bishop. And again, yeah, I really didn't know what to do here. I'm kind of just trying to buy time. So rook g3 check. We'll see what he does. He moves king f4. And again, I'm sort of like, my bishop's hanging, my rook is hanging. I don't know how I'm going to cobble this all together. But we come up with a sequence of moves here. Rook f3 check, forcing his king forward. And at this point, I'm like, maybe there's some sort of checkmate that I could actually get. Like if my king comes up, the rook comes here, maybe there's a checkmate that could happen if I get my bishop to safety. So he plays, or sorry. But then later on, I spent some time thinking about that and analyzing it, and eventually I think I calculated, if he takes this, he's going to have a hard time getting back up here to defend. And so eventually I do decide to push. Just say e3, and so my pawn is 2 squares away from queening, from promoting. He can come back to defend, but that's going to preserve my bishop. So if he takes the bishop, he's going to have no way to get up there. So then he takes, and so he's equalizing the material, but my pawn you can't stop it now. It's too close to the square. And so then he gives a check to my king. I move up, another check, I move down, and he kind of realizes all right, you're not going to be able to keep giving checks until I get over here, and he's getting his king out of the way because once I promote, it would have given a check and then allowed me to have some more opportunities there. So then I'm able to promote, and here I'm feeling better again. I'm like, okay, I have the queen back. We should be able to convert this. He gives a check to my king, move over, check, over, and then he brings his pawn forward. And this is, I do have to be a little careful here, right? Because he has his rook, he has his king, he has his pawn. If I misplay this, he could promote and he could checkmate me back here. But what I have is the ability to give checks. And so we do rook d3 check. He's going to be forced to move his king. And if he moves it up here, I'll take, he'll recapture, I'll take, and then we should be fine. These 2 pawns on the edges aren't going to be able to do anything with my queen, and I would have loved if that happened. But, he's a little tricky. He played king e7. And this is kind of the critical moment of the game where things were fine. Because if I were to take with my rook, and then he recaptures with check, my king would have to move here. He would promote, and I'd be in check, and then we'd both have queens and the game would be equal. So fortunately I was able to calculate that, and I play queen h4 check. That way and so actually as I went to move my queen to this square, he jokingly said no, and tried to prevent my hand from moving there, because he was hoping that I would fall for this trick. But luckily I don't. So then the king comes down, rook takes d7, he recaptures with check. And so it's very similar to the other scenario. The difference is now when my king moves up and he promotes, I have my queen defending the queening square. It can recapture with check, and then he can't capture because it's guarded by my king, so he's forced to king f7. So at this point, I've got the queen, and we're going to be able to checkmate him. I'm going to go eat these pawns, and then that'll be the end of it. We have maybe at this point, we both started with 100 minutes. He's down to maybe like 15 or 20 minutes. I have maybe like 20, 25 minutes on my clock. For most of the game, I was actually down on time. I was playing very slowly in the early and middle game. And he was too. I mean, we were taking roughly equal amounts of time, but I was down like 5 to 10 or 15 minutes for the majority of the middle game. And then once we got to the end game, it kind of equalized, and he actually, started using more time than me. But at this point, my goal is just to mop up these pawns and then checkmate. So I come here, attacking this pawn. I don't care if he's taking mine. My thought process here is if he takes, I can cut him off, and that's exactly what happens. And so at this point, all I have to do is make sure I don't stalemate him. And so I just slide the king over and then deliver a checkmate. Queen g7 checkmate. On move 57, the game started at 10 a.m., and by the time I left the playing hall, it was 1 p.m. This game took like 3 hours, which is a really long time, but I was very happy. I was very happy that I got a win in my first ever OTB game, and so we shook hands and said good game. And then I circled the result on my score sheet. We signed them, went and marked the result on the page, and so I was very, very happy with how this game went. It was an opening I was familiar with. Nothing too crazy happened, but I was able to win some material early and convert the win. Even though in the middle game I did, it wasn't the best technique to convert it, but nonetheless we got the job done in the end. And so that was my very first OTB game, and so props to Dwayne. He was a great guy to play, and hopefully I'll see him at more tournaments in the future. And so that kind of leads us into round 2, which was scheduled for 2:30, so it was 1 p.m. Had about an hour and a half in between games. I was able to go eat a sandwich and some chips, and then shortly afterwards, go back after that 3-hour marathon, go back for potentially for another one. So we'll get to that video next. Thank you.